Presents. This is Roy Samuelson. Today we're very happy to have Cruz with us. Before we get started, this particular episode will have swears. With that in mind, I am so proud to introduce our project manager, Cruz, who's also an internet personality and a recording artist. Christian, thank you for being on the show here.
Roy, thank you so much for having me. I'm ecstatic to be here.
Ecstatic. Yay.
Ecstatic. I'm fucking ecstatic to be here.
Fuck. Out the gate. Here we go.
Fuck it.
What the hell do you love about audio description?
I was actually thinking about this question because I was listening to the podcast that you've had, and I was like, man, these are some great answers. I want to really dive in how I feel because I just feel like I've barely been a part of the AD world. What I think solidified for me is actually something you said on a project we were working on together. You said something along the lines of, those times when you're in a movie or you're watching a show and you turn to a friend and you say, oh, that one part, or you just kind of discuss what you just experienced. This gives that ability to more people. And when you said that, it kind of clicked for me. I was like, that's what I love about this. I love that in my own life. That's like my favorite thing. I love being able, did you see this? Did you hear about that? And the ability to give that to someone else, to have those moments like actually become reality. I feel like that's what all life is all about. It's just opening those doorways. I just love the fact that it's accessible and that more people are waking up that, hey, this is a real thing. And not only is this a real thing, it's a very inspiring and powerful thing.
I can hear it in your voice too, the excitement and let's say passion. You've got some excitement here with audio description.
It's just like one of those things like when you don't know about it, you're like, how did I not know about this? How do more people not know more about this? And of course, we can only experience what we're shown. It's not against anybody who may not know. Like I said, I didn't know not too long ago, but now that I do know, I'm like, no, this needs to be more.
Let's talk a little bit about your experience with audio description. Let's start before Christian knew about AD and after Christian knew about AD. Was it as clean as an off and on switch where all of a sudden it was like Hallelujah Chorus was singing inside your head? Or was it more like gradual, like you became aware of it and then you learn more, and then you're at the place that you are now?
It's probably one of those things where you get more and more into it. I feel like it's almost like learning a new skill. Where like at first you're okay, I do like this. I'm interested, and then you hit a little bit of pitfalls like this could be a little tough, trying to figure out how to portray or get certain things across the right way. But you find your footing. When you find your footing, it's almost like let's do more. I like this. So before, audio for me has always been more of a musical experience. I love music. I love sound. There's a reason that, storytelling is one of the biggest things that, we as humans have been passing along for all these years. And that's all vocal. To me, this is just pushing the boundaries of that. It's actually funny because words are probably some of the most powerful things that we have. Facing the writing version, I'm not a writer, but learning how the writing goes into this, that was kind of tough for me to distinguish. There's proper beats that I'm learning now. There's proper beats, even with your delivery. And I'm like, how are you going to say all this in 3 seconds? I'm just kind of thinking about, because, these are questions I haven't really asked myself. And so it's like before audio description, it was like a one-way street. Now with audio description, I'm checking like, is there AD in this? Why is there not AD in this? There needs to be AD in this, So I think it's really just a matter of being open to exposure and being willing to see another side of quote unquote life.
And I'm hearing the overlap too with your experience as a sound professional getting into audio description, that with that focus on storytelling, the performance, you mentioned the writing, that as a project manager in AD, whether or not you're actually doing each of those roles, you're involved and you can absorb what's happening.
There's actually an instance we're actually kind of going through right now. It's still being worked out, but it's a matter of like using profanity, like saying like the word bitch. And, if a studio wants that delivered like bitch or b asterisk tch, and trying to figure out, well, what's the best way to deliver something like that, but not take the audience out. And I feel like some people easily were like, well, we can just do exactly as it's read. But, when I'm listening back to recordings or anything, I just feel like we need to deliver these things in the cleanest way that literally takes you scene by scene, that really pushes the narrative forward. And so right now the issue is not necessarily combating with the studio about, what they necessarily want, but more so is how do we deliver this in a way that everybody's happy, where we make sure we're thinking of our audience first and foremost, but at the same time, we're falling under the guidelines of what the studios and the execs necessarily need. So that's still kind of being worked out, but that is actually something we're dealing with right now. And I'm hoping that we can find a way to make that delivery or a thing that we don't even need to think about, because the word bitch might not be that big of a deal to some territories, but depending on where it's going and who's watching, it could be a make or break. I'm happy to just be able to say, put my foot down and go, no, we're not going to go in this direction, even if I'm getting blasted by maybe my higher ups, because, I care about the audience perspective. And I know I wouldn't want to sit there and be thrown out of, the narrative, what's going on, because then it just ruins the experience. And it's like everything was good, but that one B apostrophe TCH, trying to find that healthy medium.
That's just one example of, I'm sure, hundreds in any project. And I'm curious if we could talk a little bit, and not looking to put anyone in a place of shame or down or any negativity here, but just working through the process. What I'm hearing is that when you're collaborating with, you said a studio, that it sounds like there's assumptions on both sides of the conversation. The assumption maybe on your side is not being aware of certain territorial requirements or restrictions, and then maybe on the studio side having assumptions about, oh, AD is this and not necessarily what it needs to be. You said it so clearly, and we've echoed this, that we want to make sure our audience is immersed. So the specific question I'm trying to weed out here is, when you're collaborating with someone, whether or not they know about audio description really well or not, what are some things that you're really proud of in working through that collaboration to help get rid of assumptions on your side and the other side? It also makes it a little extra tricky when the person that's asking is the one that's paying your bill.
Tell me about that, right?
And again, not looking to put anybody down.
No,
It's
no,
just,
I totally
yeah.
understand. And I think it's a valid question. I think anybody who is not knowledgeable of AD, that's like the first thing you're gonna think. Well, how would someone watch that with all that extra noise? When people hear that, they're like, so there's just always someone talking, isn't that kind of, and it's like you're thinking about it in a otherworldly sense. It's like a fluid conversation. It's identifying. I was speaking to my girlfriend about this because she kind of asked a similar question. She has to hear me listening and watching all this all the time because, like I said, I'm very immersed in it now to where I'm trying to keep up. And I think you just think about it in the sense of, don't think about it in what you know, just try to experience it in an open environment. Because if you go into watching something and you're just expecting your ordinary of what you get, you're not going to get anything out of it. You're not going to get what the purpose of the experience is. It's like going into a debate with your mind already made up. It's like, well, there's no sense in us having a conversation about this because you're not willing to hear. You might be listening, but you're not hearing. And I think that's the important part of it.
When I think about the work that you've been doing, and I think you've kind of addressed this already in some of your answers. There's something about your approach, the energy, your understanding of what's happening from a project management perspective, that, this happens in audio description, then this, then this, then this, and then finally this project is done and you move on to the next one. If you look at all the elements of what you're doing, what's one of your favorite parts of audio description and why? And maybe it changes with each project, but is there any one thing that always comes up that's like, oh yeah, I can't wait to work on this part?
It kind of breaks into two. It depends on if we are working on projects. The VO is different, like maybe it's not in English or it's from a different territory. I like the casting part. I like the contrast of voices, and not necessarily like choosing the cast, because unfortunately I don't have that ability. I wish I did. The reason why I like it so much is because I'm learning how that goes about. And what I like about it is, like, say we have a project, someone casts who is going to be, the talent for this. And it's very curious to me as of, oh, what about this vocal tonality and these inflections are right for this project? How is it that these two tones or these two bodies of work, the film itself and the AD part of the film, how do they cohesively go together to deliver that experience? Because like I said, I really like audio. So when I'm listening to it, it's like harmonies, it's almost like a choir singing and the blend of it. I like that part. I'm a curious person. I like sound. I know I keep saying it. I know I'm a broken record. I love sound though. So I love being able to experience who it is going to be vocalizing that. But then at the back end of that, once I'm listening to it and we're moving on to mix and we're doing the post stuff, I just think it's also really, really cool to go on any of these platforms and say, I was a part of that. I was a part of that world being opening up to other people. The vocal, the sound, the way it goes together, and just being able to concretely know that the work that we're doing is impacting those, and you can see it. It's different when it's there. You can hear all the stuff that you put into it. And I wonder, if you don't mind me asking you a question, how is that for you? Your voice is being heard by so many people. I myself, I could hear your voice and I'll know it's you. Like that's how distinct your voice is. Like, is that powerful for you or is that scary ever?
I think the power for me is the experience of doing the work, the process itself. So, like you were talking about the importance of sound and music and that contrasting experience of harmony. In my experience recording, I'm looking at what's happening in the audio for the music. I'm understanding what the characters just said and what they're about to just say. I'm taking in as much information as possible. And I'm looking at the words and I'm going to bring those to life in a way that hopefully doesn't sound like, oh, Roy's reading these words. If I'm being heard in audio description, I want people to be thinking about the story that's being told. And I've worked to be able to make sure that I deliver those lines in a way that I can disappear into the story. And if you're recognizing me and you're hearing me and being like, oh, wow, Roy, that was great, then that feels like I've done a disservice to the work. You can celebrate afterward. I hope anybody would be celebrated afterward, not just my work, but any of the great voiceover performers who are doing audio description and what they're bringing. That's one of the reasons why we created this website, not just for the performers, but also the writers and also the engineers, because each of these contributions do make a difference in making sure that the story's being told. And you already said that at the very top. So in my experience, I'm like so focused right now and staying present with what's happening in the scene. And I want to make sure that the lines are delivered in a way that make that a part of the film and not make me stand out in a way that takes away from the story. So I'm kind of beating around the bush here a little bit, but at the same time, it's so important. And I thank you for the question. That's what I always try to bring in every project.
I actually have a follow-up question, if you don't mind. Because I did say that I can tell when it's you. And just, off your response, you said, well, I don't want people to know that it's me. I want it to be all about the story, which one, I think that's honestly so powerful that you feel that way because, sometimes people don't feel that way. Sometimes as much as we are giving, sometimes it could still be about us. And that's totally human nature. I feel that from you. You can tell that there's a genuine care for the space. My question was, when you hear something like someone says, I know, oh, that's Roy, is that a negative feeling for you? Or is that kind of like not necessarily getting your flowers, but an acknowledgement to, the work that you do, that you're so active in the space that you're a known figure? I'm just curious.
Sure. So there's two parts. Let me be a little more clear about making sure that the story's being told and I'm not getting in the way, that is for when it's happening. So like if someone's in the middle of watching a TV show or a movie and I happen to be performing the audio description, I don't want them to be thinking about it if they're watching the movie. Afterward and before, great. I've got a ton of favorite AD performers, and whenever I know that they're working on something, I'm really eager to hear it because once I'm hearing it, I'm not thinking about them. But it's because what they're bringing, I know I'm in good hands. That's the litmus test for me. If every single line sounds very consistent and it's all very conversational, some people consider that a good read. For that would probably take me out if there's a emotional story being told because every single line is the same. And if it sounds like they're just going cue to cue, then that's going to take me out. But if someone is really understanding the context again, the music, the characters, and what's really trying to be told, that we can ride that as AD performers and join that in a way that doesn't distract. And also, you had said earlier about in casting, contrasting voices, that we can join in that contrast in a way that still supports the story. So it's not like we have to sound the exact same. I get that. If I get hired again, that's a really nice endorsement. If a company decides that, oh, you're a good fit for this, we want to bring you back, then that is its own form of, hey, we like what you did and we want more of it. On the performance side, that is its own reward. I think what has been most rewarding for me is for the last however many years that I've been working in audio description, I've done my best to try to say, here's why credits matter. Here's why the different roles matter. Like, for example, you're a project manager of AD. There's also writers. There's also engineers. And there might be people that do multiple things and overlap. I want to celebrate those roles because as we celebrate those roles, that watered down, oh, it's just audio description, and it's almost brushed off like some sort of dismissive, oh, you just do audio description and you're done. It's like this easy thing. But you and I both know there's so many people involved and so many decisions being made and so much creativity that that's the kind of stuff that I have been so passionate about celebrating on every project with AD, because it is helping pivot away from this race to the bottom dollar of how cheap can we make it to really bringing our audiences, our AD audiences, along for this immersive experience. And you started off the conversation talking about that with the storytelling, that we're able to provide our audiences this immersive experience. And when the audience isn't immersed, I feel like that's yet another form of discrimination.
Interesting. It shows your indirect care is what I'm getting from that, right? Like
Yeah.
if we're delivering it in such a way where it's almost lazy and you could tell our heart isn't in the meaning of it, that is a disservice. That's what I'm picking up from that, correct?
I think I want to be a little more clear because there's a lot of people that have heart and have care, but also don't have the professionalism.
Mm.
I just read about a $200 million budget on a film. When there's so much being invested in a film, to have the work that we do treated as so much less, this afterthought, I think that's where the disservice comes. So there's a lot of people that care deeply and that have a ton of heart. But if they don't understand the story element, if they don't have a sense of sound or training or writing or editing or mixing, that passion may not necessarily translate to the AD audience. And it's like, let's advocate for why that matters and also acknowledge it's subjective. That, I'm not going to be everybody's favorite. I might remind someone of their ex-boyfriend and they can't stand to listen to me. I lean pretty strongly on professionalism, that with professionalism, if that is applied to audio description, we're going to be in good hands. And that care and that heart will come through in each of the roles that are being done in the audio description.
I see. I get that. I get what you're saying. I think that kind of builds off kind of on what you guys were discussing about how sometimes AD can get lost, or how sometimes a studio will hire different people to do the same project. I personally feel like that is wild that even happens, because there's no continuity.
Yeah.
It breaks the hard work of the story itself.
Yeah.
I actually hear that. And it's actually something I wrote down when I was listening to your podcast, because I actually have been sitting here thinking, your guest, she mentioned there should be a one platform for all AD. And I've thought that myself. I've thought, man, there's all these different avenues we're sending all of this audio to, but I've always thought, how do we make sure that it's actually getting to people? Because it's really up to the studio to decide if they want to include AD or not.
I hear you, and I understand that solution there. I've been looking at the idea of production owning audio description instead of distribution, and I know there's all sorts of problems with that. This is, I think, where things are headed, that if production owns this work, it solves 20 problems, including the one that you're addressing that was brought up in that podcast of, why is it on this distribution panel and it isn't in the movie theaters, or vice versa, or, as it travels from streaming service to streaming service, why isn't it the same? Why am I even not getting it sometimes? That if production owns it, then that means that it will be tied to production and there's a better chance for it to travel. And thank goodness for the streaming services for stepping in and saying, hey, we're going to provide audio description. So they've laid the groundwork.
I feel like we are definitely headed in a direction where I'm almost surprised nowadays when I don't see streaming services are including AD, to be completely honest.
Yeah.
I think the market for it is definitely opening up as the exposure for it is getting up. And there was actually a Vice documentary miniseries talking about how in the later years, our hearing has kind of been pushed towards these kinds of narratives, whether it's, inclusion of subtitles, whether it's the inclusion of audio description. I personally am curious on where that inception started. Like I'm curious, who was the first, streaming service to start AD? Do you know? Who's taking the lead in that? Would you feel comfortable sharing from your perspective?
There's a whole story there. Audio description itself has been around for more than 30 years. And so when streaming services launched, there were a few glitches that got fixed. And those streaming services have really taken the lead on making sure that audio description is included in various ways. We can name a handful of streaming services that have been from the beginning, and others have taken the mantle and taken it to an even better and different direction. And there's still a few that are just starting out and stumbling through and figuring it out, that there's a little bit of forgiveness that can be given as these organizations are finding ways to include audio description. They're getting their system in place. I think where the problem is that ownership, that for some reason the production owns the music, or we're able to hear the actors talk or see the actors, or the sets stay the same in the film, whether it goes on one streaming service or another. Mm-hmm. So with audio description, assuming that they were kept under the same production ownership, that would solve a lot. Let's go back to one of the things that you and I had talked about earlier in this conversation, the assumptions that sometimes the client makes about what audio description is, that could be problematic, and that could cause some challenges with a creative input that might not be what our audience is asking for. So all these kinds of conversations are really exciting to see how it's being figured out. And I'm kind of pivoting away from your question directly, but there's a lot of history to audio description, and the audio description project, adp.acb.org. That's audio description project, adp.acb.org, has a ton of information, not only the 10,000 plus film and TV shows that have audio description, but how to turn it on, and some history, and podcasts like this one and many others. So there's all sorts of resources there that people can learn more about, more of the history. But it's really exciting to see what's happening now and where things are going.
Oh, definitely. And I think we're heading into a more universal need. Like I already said, that it's going to be a requirement. It's not going to be something where they're like, should we not? Do we have it in our budget? It's like, you should have it in your budget. You definitely need to have it in your service and on your platform.
And with that budget, if I'm in charge of 200 projects, then I'm going to make sure that budget is as low as possible to save some money. If I just care about my project, then I'm going to make sure that my project has brought the care and concern that I brought to the whole film. And I want the audio description to reflect that. That ownership is another benefit for production being a part of this.
In situations like that, would you, just moving forward with how AD can move forward? Because I feel like you could almost look at it in the sense of like a music artist, where a music artist may be recording a song, but they get paid residuals and royalties with plays and various other things. In this space, I feel like that could also make sense for, a performer as yourself. Do you find that we could ever enter a space to where you can maybe own your masters, like your recordings yourself, and in that sense, receive those royalties for the work that you've done?
The end result, I think, of what you're approaching, I think aligns with a lot of the union approaches for valuing the contribution. And that makes sense. That kind of compensation will allow for the best to enter this field. I know that there's been a lot of people who were incredibly brilliant at audio description, but couldn't find it sustainable and had to step away. That includes blind professionals as well as sighted professionals. I'm a sighted professional. I can't speak for blind people, but I know that when a blind person does this work, they should be compensated as much as anyone else. And I find that that is a very important element. So that kind of standardization of rates for performers, I'm 100% behind, and making sure that the work that we're doing is valued for what we're bringing. But also that goes for the writer, and that goes for the engineer, and that goes for the quality control. That each of these roles means so much to our audience that those should be valued. To determine what that value is, it still seems to come from a production budget and valuing that instead of just, okay, we've got this mandate, we have to do audio description. What's the least amount that we can throw at this just to get the box checked? That kind of makes it seem like it's a race to how cheap we can make it instead of how great we can make this work and how wonderful we can make this current project just soar.
That's almost a little disheartening in a way to think that that message could be being pushed, I guess, like this is an afterthought. Especially nowadays, inclusion is so important. Here, I'm from America, California specifically. I feel like we're at a point where we want to show to as many people as possible. To hold weight to what you're saying, it really does sometimes come down to people kind of like, crunching numbers and thinking, if we don't do this, maybe I can keep this. And it is a tricky situation because when we're talking about percentage of payments to various individuals who are working in the space, of course, there's always going to be an uphill battle when it comes to trying to get, what rightfully people may be owed for generalized work that they may be doing versus what the industry standard is and the malpractices that we've come accustomed to. I'm actually really happy about, the writing stuff that we've made a little bit of step forward in. But I do think that just to, like, as you're saying, that does need to trickle down to various other aspects. Because, like you said earlier, all of this work is not a singular line. It hits so many various teams. And it's not just one person, it's one person part of a larger team that's handing off to a larger team. And we're all just working together to try and do the best that we can. But exactly as you said, sometimes we need support in other ways to make that the best experience for the audience.
Sure, I'd love to give another approach to this that I'm not sure if we've explicitly said here, but back to that compensation, that there is a really good case to be made that, well, if we have a certain amount of money to throw at audio description and we've got 200 projects, let's divvy that up so that all 200 can have it. And let's focus on quantity, how many shows can have audio description, which is, as you and I both know, that it's so important. But I think when that quantity, we need more and more and more audio description. When that gets tethered to, if we reduce the amount of shows that we do, then we'll have better quality, but we won't have as many shows that have audio description. So let's drop the quality. I don't think that those two things are related. I don't think that saying, well, you can only have quantity or quality, I don't think that that's a fair comparison. I think by equating those two things and saying, well, we want to do more, 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 so we're going to have to crap out on quality, that's an unfair position for our audience. That it doesn't have to be one or the other, that we can do audio description. And as you had said, including it within the process, that is going to make sure if someone is focused on quality, that's going to make sure that the quality is a part of the quantity. And I hate when those things get separated. Oh, you can either have quantity or quality. I think that's an unfair position for our audiences to be put in, as well as it's important to have quantity. It's important to have many shows with audio description, and all should have description.
When you're facing the battle of quantity or quality, like if you don't have quality, then people aren't going to want more. If your quantity's low, you might be thinking, oh, well, this is going to make them want more. But I would argue that it's the opposite. You could have a really good product and a little bit of it, but then it's going to be like, why don't you have more of this product? Now we feel like you are doing a cash grab. It doesn't feel authentic and genuine. So it's like that dangerous battle. So I totally hear you on that. It should be just as straightforward as we want to do the best that we can, and we're going to do the best that we can with every single one that we do. It's tough. Entertainment is a tough place on all aspects.
I hear you say this is where we can be headed. And I love that question, that aspirational, where things are headed or where they should be. Is there anything that is on your mind that you could share with our audience that you feel like audio description is headed in this way and you're really excited to see it happen? Something that really needs to be a part of AD.
Audio description's been around for 30 years, right? It's in a way, it's not new, but in another way, to some people, it is new. That just kind of makes your mind race, like, what are the possibilities? It almost kind of gets exciting. It's like, oh, like you could do this, you could do that. And it makes you wonder, like, even with just simple platforms, like how could we include this on this platform? You mentioned earlier before, internet personality, recording artist. When I'm doing those kinds of works for myself on my own things, I'm thinking of those things because I've been lucky enough to be introduced to this space where now I have a bigger world. My world isn't what it was. It's been opened up to so many more possibilities. And so when it comes to these kinds of things, it kind of also, for me, it goes back to what you were saying about the quantity and quality of, well, let's figure out how we can put this space into more things, but let's do it right. So my mind immediately kind of goes to things that I feel like everyday people might not even think about. They might be mundane, but something as simple as like watching a generic YouTube video, watching a TikTok video, it's Twitter, Instagram, all these little different platforms that are social media that we use in our everyday life, that how can we open that up? Maybe there's apps that I'm unknowledgeable that others can use, but I'm talking about on a commercial front where, like, we're talking about platforms, we're talking about studios, we're talking about these individuals or these, I keep using the word of execs, maybe these owners of these companies, because they're the ones who are making these decisions overall on how this money is going to be used, what direction the company is going in, but how to get them to open their mind and add these things so that it's just normalized. It's not here's the movie, let's do AD. No, 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 no. This is the movie. This is the cast for the movie. This is the voice cast. Let's get it to that point. That's kind of where my mind has been in this last week with this idea, because I do think it's very important for individuals to have their own space, because, it's important to be able to relate, kind of like how we spoke in the beginning of that moment of where it's like, you remember when this happened and oh, that part was my favorite part, that connection of that genuine like that we have in that similarity, I feel is what holistically kind of brings everyone together. I do think it's important that these things, such as audio description, are used in their spaces to where people, like you said, that website, that people can go there. If you're knowledgeable of the website, you can go there and you can see a list of everything, but also getting to the point where it's like, it's so normalized that it's not even like I need to find the website. It's already there. It's as simple as when you're watching a video and do you want subtitles? Cool. Do you want audio description? Cool, because we got it. It's here. I think that should be the direction we're heading in. I feel very hopeful and promising that I think we are headed in that direction. I mean, it may be 30 years, but AD is just getting started. You know what they say, the early 20s sucks. We hit your 30s and it's, you have a little bit more experience. By the time
Yeah.
40 comes around, you're
Right?
doing good. So, and I think by the time we hit 40, we're going to be in a really good position.
Nice. Very cool, Christian. Is there anything else you'd love to share with our audience?
I just want to say thank you for even opening the opportunity to me and just having me on.
Mm.
I really, really appreciate you as an individual, you as a professional, first and foremost. You are very, very professional, and I very, very much respect that and appreciate that from my side of things. I very much appreciate that. So thank you for allowing me to come on here and share my thoughts, listening to me ramble, and I just look forward to, building and maintaining our relationship. And I can't wait to hear the episode when it airs.
Thanks, Christian. Thank you so much. How can we follow you on social media? Speaking of social media, websites, anything else?
You can follow me on all platforms at my stage name is Penthouse C. Thank you, Roy. Appreciate you.